Hello, I'm Tim Smith of the Adams County Historical Society, and welcome to another episode of Monuments Monday. And today is part 2 of Big Round Top Odds and Ends. And also I'd like to mention that this is the last of the videos in the Big Round Top series. But don't worry, we have more monuments, markers, and tablets in the town of Gettysburg coming up, and we'll start a new series also shortly. You know, if there's a video or a monument that you would like us to see covered in this series, you know, go ahead and put something in the description. Another odd and end I wanted to mention is the road system around Big Round Top. And of course, this is a comment on the road system all over the park. But, you know, when you're on a park avenue today, you know, some people imagine that those park avenues have always been at those locations, or they're the road that was put in initially after the park was created. But over the years, what I have learned is there was a road system that was in use at the time of the battle. And basically, that was farm lanes that led from farms into areas such as Big Round Top. There were roads that were created during the battle by the soldiers themselves. And then, during the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association years, they created a system of roads to bring visitors to the different sites on the battlefield. And they're the ones that put the first roads into the area of Little Round Top, for instance. And then, in 1895, the Gettysburg National Military Park Commission started to place more formal roads around the battlefield, and they put in roads. And then, after the National Park Service took over management and care of the Gettysburg National Military Park in the 1930s, they started to establish their own road system in the area. And in the area of Big Round Top, you can see, for instance, the farm lane that led from the Slider farm up into what I refer to as the D-shaped field, and then up onto the side of Big Round Top. And we have the Warren map of the battlefield, which was surveyed in 1868 and 1869. And we'll show a close-up of that farm lane from the Slider farm into Big Round Top. And we have this image I discussed in the summit of Big Round Top video, where you can look out across from the summit of the observatory on Big Round Top towards the Slider farm. And in the left of the photograph, you can actually see a couple of the later roads. You can see a road that was used by the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association, and then off to the left of it, or to the south of it, you can see in this 1898 photograph, the 1895-1896 road that came into the area. And one of the things that's interesting about this War Department road is it had a few hairpin turns on it. And I kind of feel bad a little bit for the War Department when they put in these roads. They put in these roads all over the battlefield, about 1895, 1896, up until, you know, 1898, early 1900. They did a serious amount of road work. And then, by 1903, we have automobiles. And by 1910, there are cars everywhere. And these roads are built for carriages pulled by horses that go at a very slow speed. And all of a sudden, we have cars riding around these hairpin turns, and it was just not suitable for automobiles. So when the National Park Service took over the battlefield in the 1930s, they determined to remove some of these hairpin turns and put in more gentle curves on the battlefield. And in 1936, it was announced that the park was going to reconstruct South Confederate Avenue from the Alabama Monument over to Little Round Top. And construction took place in 1937, and I think in 1938, October 1938, they announced that they were done with the project. And basically, they put a road in at a totally different location than the War Department road. And I first became aware of this when I was younger. I had mentioned before that I bought the Gettysburg National Military Park Commission books that has photographs of the constructions of the 1895 road. And they have some photographs of the road showing rocks along it that I had trouble lining up at first. And then I got this postcard. It's a rotograph postcard. It's from like 1910. I'll show it here. And clearly, you know, I did not know where this image was taken, and it's a different road. So what I eventually did was I took the Pennsylvania Gettysburg map from 1904, and I took a modern park map, and I made a transparency copy of one of them and laid it over the other, made them the same size, and I was able to figure out where the old road system was in relation to the new road system. And by doing this, then I was able to go out and find the location of these various photographs taken by the War Department. And what I realized was the War Department road came across Rock Creek, went over a bridge that was built in the 1890s, and then it went up the side of Big Round Top, and it went by the breastworks built by the Confederate soldiers during the battle, and through the area where Farnsworth Charge occurred. Now, in the 1940s, when the park redid the road, they put it in a different location. They actually tore down a stone wall of the deep-shaped field and just built the road over top of it and put it at a different location that doesn't go by the breastworks built by the Confederate Army. As a matter of fact, they just kind of put a hole through the breastworks. And it's just a different road. And it's interesting when you're out there to consider and compare the different road system through this area that we're showing in these photographs. And one last thing, there is a quarry on the side of Big Round Top. And when you look at the early Warren map of the battlefield, especially in areas where there's lots of rocks, it is difficult to tell the difference between a tree and a rock. And it is impossible almost to tell the difference between large trees and small trees and brush. And unless it's an open field, we have great difficulty in determining how wooded an area was at the time of the battle or how open it was based upon the Warren map. But we have photographs that were taken in the 1880s. And we have this extraordinary photograph that was taken at the base of Big Round Top at the site of a quarry, which was probably a quarry prior to the American Civil War. And this image is looking out across the Slider Farm. And I learned the location of this. And you can see in this photograph that this area was much more open than at the time in the 1880s than it is now. And I think there's an honest debate amongst the park as to if this area was open the way it is in this photograph at the time of the battle, or if it had been grown up, or I should say clear cut at some point after the battle. And you know, obviously today the park has trees around the monument to the 1st Vermont Cavalry, and they are going with the concept that the area was wooded and not as open as it was, as I believe it was at the time. I'm sure that it's no surprise that I disagree with the park as to their clearing policies on this place. But in the Fighting for East Cavalry Field, there is a feature on the battlefield called the D-shaped field. And we'll show a map of the D-shaped field here. And around it today, it's all wooded. You can't see anything. But we have this photograph, and we have two clear accounts that it was much more open at the time. And one of these accounts is from a guy in the 5th Pennsylvania Reserves who's on Little Round Top on July 3rd and says that he is watching Farnsworth charge around the Slider Farm that afternoon. And then, of course, we have an account from Battles and Leaders of the Civil War by Captain Henry Parsons, who mentions that at 5 o'clock on the afternoon, they were put in position at a place we refer to as the Bushman Hill, just to the south, a big round top, and across a narrow valley of Plum Run from it. According to his account, I rode out to the brow of the hill and had an excellent view of the field. Directly in front of us opened the valley towards Gettysburg with its wheat fields. At the right, and less than half a mile distance, rose Round Top. In the intersection, in the intervening valley, lay the Slider Farm with its low cross fences. Projecting from Round Top was a hill, perhaps 100 feet high, on top of which was surrounded by a high stone wall, the D-shaped field. The slopes of the hill were covered with immense granite boulders. A road or lane extended from the Emmitsburg Road to its base and then turned to the left towards Devil's Den. Beyond this road ran a high rail fence, and the only opening being at the right and left of the walled field on the hill. Above this, and along the rocky, wooded slopes of Round Top, Law's brigade were firmly entrenched. And again, reading these accounts of the battle and lining up these historic photographs, and especially the one from the quarry, gives us an idea of what the field looked like at the time of the battle when this fighting occurred. The 1st Vermont Cavalry Memorial, which today, of course, sits in the middle of what we refer to as the D-shaped field, was dedicated on October 9th, 1889. And we'll show a photograph of that. And of course, for cavalry aficionados, Farnsworth Charge is one of the more dramatic incidents of the battle, and probably the last major fighting at Gettysburg during the fighting.
It's a picture of the 1st Vermont Cavalry Monument that appeared in Blue and Gray magazine. It says the photo is in a collection of David Roth. You can see the 1st Vermont Cavalry Monument out across an open field. Also, notice in the picture this rock right there. Now we're standing in the exact location where this photo was taken, at this quarry, over 100 years ago today. And of course, from the photograph, you note all the ground in the background was open. And here there are many trees all over the place.
Just a reminder that in the description of these videos, we do put links to other sources about what we're discussing, especially in this big Round Top series. So be sure to check out some of the links. Now remember, if you like the content that we put on our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe.